we've had this amazing rally in Bitcoin. We've gone all the way back up to the FTX kind of beginning point where that began to kind of collapse. If we get regulation and price doesn't dump out and make new lows, I would then say potentially the lows could be in. Those are the ones to do it with because I do think they'll survive and thrive in a post-regulatory environment. If we slip into this recession, my fear is it becomes a long recession, a multi-year recession, because the Fed's not bailing us out due to inflation staying slightly elevated.
So with Ethereum, do you feel like we see a 17 before we see a retracement back down to 14 right now based on what you're seeing in the charts itself? What is an indicator for you if Bitcoin were to hit a 25K marker?
In this highlight, Solway reveals what's behind the shocking Bitcoin rally despite the economic recession. Then Solway discusses what the impact of imminent regulation will be on the crypto industry. He reveals what he believes are the safest bets and which ones are destined to fail, the impact of regulation and what cryptos to go with. And finally, make sure you stay until the end to find out Soloway's opinion on the Ethereum vs Bitcoin debate and why he's a fan of one over the other. Now let's hear what Gareth Soloway has to say.
And that's where the resistance point is. So I think this is an area when we go into Genesis where it's going to make people maybe stop and just pause. Let's see how it plays out. But so far, we're definitely not seeing a major panic of any sort coming through
your Bitcoin chart. And look at some of the things that have been happening. One, if you look at the run up and the comparison of what we've seen right now, and I've been following some of the tweets you had out on Twitter. What is your theory right now in terms of the current price action for Bitcoin right now in terms of running forward, or are we looking at a sideways?
Yeah, so let's jump into the chart here and see what we have. So we can see that there was this wedge pattern from the collapse of FTX, and then we went in a very, very quiet range. And one of the little notes that told us there was going to be some volatility was that we saw volatility in Bitcoin. I think it got to the lowest it had ever gotten. And anytime you go into this sleep mode, there's this tendency to wake up with a bang. And we certainly saw it here. You could see the breakout occurred right there. And as soon as that happened, there was kind of this melt up or bear market rally. Now, the reason why I'm calling it a bear market rally is that until we take out key levels, this is just a run-of-the-mill rip-your-face-off rally. And I know that sounds crazy to a lot of Bitcoiners and crypto people, but if you look at other markets, the S&P, the NASDAQ, even stocks like Tesla, a bounce of 25, 35, 45% in a bear market is actually a relatively common occurrence. So as of now, I think we've rallied about 30, 35% in Bitcoin off of the lows. At this point, we still haven't taken out the psychological level here, which was the FTX high. And you can see how the price is stalled there, right? And we're even seeing a little bit of a pullback today, although we're off of the lows. But for me, at least, this is, as of now, it's a bear market rally. I have to treat it as such until we start taking out key levels such as this FTX high pivot. Yeah, so definitely that FTX high pivot, which is around 21,500. Psychologically, there was a lot of damage done. We know about all the news media, that the coverage that SBF had and the FTX collapse had. And I think on a psychological basis, if we can get price above and hold above that level, that then would then create kind of this confidence in Bitcoin, in cryptocurrency. Another thing that I'll be watching for is, honestly, I want to see where this regulation is coming in. I want to see when this is coming to fruition. If we get regulation and price doesn't dump out and make new lows, I would then say potentially the lows could be in. And the reason I say that is because as soon as we get that regulation, it should create forced transparency. And forced transparency then creates the ability for bigger money to start to take positions. And if we're still trading up here into that, I think the lows might be in. I still am in the camp, though. Let's be clear. I'm still in the bear market camp. I still think this is a run-of-your-mill bear market rally, and I still think we'll make new lows.
So with the drawdown, obviously leading into the FOMC meeting next month, we're going to get a chance to see maybe a little bit of a hand being played by the Feds as to whether or not we'll start to see some either pause or slowdowns in terms of rate hikes. With all that being said, let's say we get the rate hikes to essentially kind of pause and or slowly curtail throughout the rest of this year. You also look at the drawdown potentially with the traditional stock market, and over here on the crypto and risk assets, Or do you feel at that point, where would you be looking? Because both of those markets would be in a position of really a high volatility, not necessarily tradable. How would you go with that?
Yeah, and that's a tricky thing, right? So my forecasts are saying that the Fed has one or two more rate hikes in them, probably both 25 basis points, and then they're done. And we saw some economic news this morning that was very, very weak. It does portend to show a recession on the horizon. We just haven't seen the jobs market catch up yet, and I think that's going to be one of the realizations for the markets. Now, initially, you're going to see investors cheer because the Fed is going to go back to a neutral policy, which means they're not hiking, but they're not dropping. I think that ultimately the market in the second half of the year is going to start to get very scared over the aspect that inflation remains above 2% and the Fed cannot stimulate even in a recession, right? So if we slip into this recession, my fear is it becomes a long recession, a multi-year recession, because the Fed's not bailing us out due to inflation staying slightly elevated. And I think, Paul, I think one of the things to recognize too for investors is that while the markets have declined, historically, if we look at bear markets, this isn't that big of a decline. The S&P is not even down right now 20% from its all-time highs. And remember, the move from 2009 to these all-time highs, or from the COVID low to these all-time highs, was probably the biggest move we have almost ever seen in the stock market, at least reminiscent of the dot-com bubble move up in charts. So I do caution people that at least in the very least, you got to think we have to head down to that February 2020 high, which was just before that COVID collapse. In the very least, that kind of is the removal of the liquidity put in during COVID.
Ethereum had some significant moves over the weekend. That was obviously tracing against what was happening with Bitcoin. Actually did a little bit better performance-wise. What are your thoughts when you look at ETH right now?
Yeah, so ETH has had a great move up. Same kind of issue, though, here is with Bitcoin, right? Here's your kind of pivot high just before the FTX kind of debacle occurred, and we see that big drop. And notice how price has gotten up there and is just having so much trouble getting through that level. So for me, I'll be watching this approximately $1,650 level, $1,650 on Ethereum. Again, I like the fact that it may be consolidating in a bullish manner, but it is still technically extended on the chart, and it still needs to kind of digest this move up before I get more confidence that it can break out. But again, I think one of the things to keep in mind, folks, is that, for me, it's the best of breed. So Ethereum and Bitcoin, if you're going to hold crypto into kind of maybe regulation or whatever it may be, those are the ones to do it with, because I do think they'll survive and thrive in a post-regulatory environment. The other ones I would just be generally cautious on. They're more for allocating the proper amount of investment so that if something does go wrong, such as an FTX or something else, you don't get hammered too badly.
So with Ethereum, do you feel like we see a 17 before we see a retracement back down to 14 right now, based on what you're seeing in the charts itself?
That's a really tough question. So again, right now, I honestly couldn't tell you. I don't know if they'll pop it up to touch that 17 level or pierce that 1650 before they bring it back in. We did see a little bit of selling today. There was, I think, a DOJ announcement about a crypto player out there, but it didn't turn out to be anything major for the crypto industry. So price has come back up. But I still think that we are short-term overbought. And I do worry that if the stock market, which is down pretty decently today, if we start seeing spillover where that market goes down more and more, I do think it leads into crypto and brings crypto in. Sure.
Yeah. Hey, Gareth, when you're looking at the charts, this is something that, we try to do here, especially around ETH and Bitcoin, the comparison. Typically, they're tracing fairly well closely in comparison to growth. What is an indicator for you if Bitcoin were to hit a 25K marker in some way through whether it's this bear market rally? Where do you feel ETH would kind of move at that point with just kind of the scenarios we've been watching, which has been pretty much a power play on ETH's behalf?
Yeah, so both are creating potential bull flags. Again, it's still tough to know because they're both extended. But if we were to get up a move on Bitcoin, let's say to 25,000, I would dare say that Ethereum would probably at least test 2,000 on the charts, maybe even slightly above 2,000. So again, that would be, by the way, if you get to the 2,000 level, that's your August 22 high pivot right above 2,000 on ETH. So that would probably be where I would be looking for it.
I highly recommend that you check out where crypto expert Gareth Soloway discusses the increase in the price of Bitcoin and if we're headed to the next bull market. Click this video now.